Welcome to the Win, Make, Give podcast. Chad Himes here, joined by my friend Bob Stewart. Bob, how are you doing today?
Chad, Happy New Year.
Yes,
Happy New Year,
officially.
Right? One of the very few times I think we can start the podcast and know that, like, date-wise, no matter when it releases, we're probably going to be okay saying Happy New Year, right? We couldn't do that until today.
It'll probably be sometime in the month of January. Bob, that's also, we know it's going to be sometime in the month of January because we're coming to the end of season number 2. Can you believe that we are almost at episode 100 for season number 2 again?
So that makes 200 episodes we've done?
200 episodes, and I think you've been on about, what, like 18 of them?
Anyways, listen, I'm surprised anybody's still listening, if I could be completely honest. The only reason was because we got awesome people to come in and talk to us, like Brian, who we're going to introduce here in a minute. But I think if it was just me and you, we would have petered out a while ago, don't you think? We'd probably still be doing it. Nobody'd be listening. All right.
Yes, we'd still be doing it, and it would be us listening, and it would be therapy sessions for us. So we appreciate you, audience, for sticking with us and sticking with us through the end of season 2. We're going to be bringing you in the off season the Wealth Series again. We're going to replay and relaunch the Wealth Series, so just keep listening because that's going to be coming to you. You know you want to hear it all again before we come back for season number 3. Yeah,
hey, look,
Bob,
I don't care about all that. What are we doing here today?
There you go. You already mentioned it. The reason people are coming is because we have amazing guests that we bring on for our great conversations all the time. And today is no different when it comes to that. We have with us a guy, Brian Will. I was talking with Brian a few moments before you joined us here for the recording. Yet, Brian, as you might know from listening to a few of our episodes, I don't like to read some bio of you. I want to introduce you to the audience by however you want to introduce yourself to the audience. So say hello to the Win, Make, Give audience and tell everybody a little bit about who you are and why you're here.
Bob and Chad, I appreciate you having me on today. I understand this is like the 200th episode. You've had over 1 million listens. Is that what I heard on another episode?
You got the numbers. We're right around all of that. Yes.
That's incredible.
Thank you.
Yeah, real quick. I'm going to be probably a little different than a lot of guys you've talked to that are entrepreneurs and business owners. I came from a really rough background growing up, got kicked out of high school, managed to get back in and graduate at the bottom of my class, didn't go to college, joined the military, did Air Force and Army, both 4 years in each. Tried to hold a job. I couldn't. Best I could do was about a busboy. Got married with no job, no car, no place to live, lived with my grandma. Started my first business when I was 21 in landscaping. Managed to build that up into 7 franchises. Lost it all. Didn't go bankrupt, but pretty darn close. Got into the insurance business, selling insurance, health insurance, like door to door. Ended up building that up and sold it to an early .com back in 1999. Started the first call center, direct-to-consumer call center for health insurance in the country at the time. After that sold out, we started another company in the insurance industry, built it up, sold it to a venture capital firm out of California. It's called getinsured.com today, one of the largest state exchange providers in the country. Started an online marketing company called Online Media Promotions. Sold it to a private equity firm. Turned into the largest digital marketing company in the country. Started another company in the insurance industry. Sold it to an Indian call center company. Bought some restaurants, wrote a couple books, and now looking to see what I want to do with the rest of my life. So that's kind of my story.
Man, there's a lot of places to go here.
Oh,
Chad. Yeah. I'm fat. I have young children, Mark or Brian, and I'm fascinated by like just that you seemingly had like this entrepreneurial spirit, right? Like you got 21 instead of, well, maybe it's because you sucked at being a busboy. I don't know, but right? You like started a company at 21 years old. Like what from your upbringing? Is there anything you can point your finger at or any, way your parents acted or things that like put that entrepreneurial bug in your head?
I got to tell you, my success ultimately, unfortunately, was driven through a rough childhood, a lot of anger, big chip on my shoulder, which made me essentially unemployable. I just couldn't work for people. And so, I like to joke that I got into my first business because I was too dumb to know that I was going to fail and didn't have any place else to go. Like Richard Gere in Officer and a Gentleman. I got no place to go. So I started a business and really, growing up, my grandfather was from Mississippi, third grade educated, ran multiple businesses on his own over in Mississippi, from running dozers and cutting roads and car lots and all kinds of crazy stuff. And I remember as a kid, I used to drive around with him all the time. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world that he didn't have to go to a job. He could pretty much do whatever he wanted. And we'd hang out at the diner and, eat those little muffin things for lunch every day. So, when I got to that age where I couldn't hold a job and I was now married, and didn't know what I was going to do, I thought, well, I might as well go into business for myself. So that's what I did.
It sounds in some ways like the business stuff I heard you tick off about your grandfather, like you didn't land too far away from that starting the landscaping business then.
Not really. And the reason I got into landscaping, honestly, is because I got married. I'm 21, living with my grandmother, didn't have a car, didn't have a job. And a buddy of mine asked me if I wanted to come mow grass on his grass mowing crew, and he paid me $4 an hour. And I said yes. And so I started mowing grass for $4 an hour. And after a couple of weeks, I started looking at all the lawns we were cutting and looking at how much money we were taking in. And I'm getting $160 and we're pulling in a couple grand on our truck. And I thought, why was this stupid? And I kind of know who it is. Thinking anybody can cut grass, right? So I went and borrowed a truck and bought a lawnmower and a blower and a weed eater and launched my first business. And there you go.
Wow. All right. So as Bob said, there was so much in your intro that we can be unpacking. I think there's like 4 episodes worth of content right there. Let me first go way back and say thank you for your service, as you'd been Army and Air Force. But what I want to ask you about is the thing that I heard most that made me go, wow, was you built it all up. I think I heard you say 7 franchise and then lost it all.
Yes.
So the rise and the fall, was it just the .com bust that you got caught up in? Was it completely on you just not knowing how to truly manage and run these organizations? Talk to us, because I think the greatest lessons we ever learn in our life come from failure. Talk to us about what caused the catastrophe and what you took away from that, Brian.
So I'm gonna focus on something you just said, because I hear this a lot from people, and I do a fair amount of consulting, and I've heard this phrase a lot that in order to succeed, you need to fail, right? We've all heard that.
Sure.
But what everybody leaves out of that phrase, and what I just heard you stick into it, is it's not the failure, it's the learning from the failure. There are a lot of people that fail over and over and over and over and never seem to succeed because they never learn. So you've always got to, in every failure, step back and say, what did I do wrong? What could I have done different? You got to be honest with yourself and get your ego out of the way and learn from that, and then take that and move on to the next, thing that you're going to do. In my case, it was my first business. We started doing well. And I was spending every damn dime I had, right? I got 3 cars. I got a motorcycle. We're going on trips. But, I'm living every week waiting for those checks to come in my landscaping company. And, a series of events happened, and then we got shorted about $150,000 on a job. And suddenly I had no savings. I had nothing, and I lost everything because I still had to pay my creditors. I ended up having to sell the houses, the cars. So literally everything I owned, and went back. I had $5,000 left, took my wife and my new baby and went and rented a house and went back to me and a shovel.
Can I, did that? So speaking of learning from that, then, we have a concept around here. We run a lot of different businesses. We partner in a lot of businesses. And one of the things that we do, and we've actually extended this during COVID. Traditionally, we would always hold 4 months of reserves back for that business. And we've extended it to 6 months during COVID times. Was that a practice then that came out of that? Is you realizing like, oh my gosh, like I need to have reserves set back, or kind of what was the learning out of that happened?
This is a giant learning experience. If you think about it, I went from being what I thought was on top of the world to back to nothing. And so when we went into the next business, my first thought is, okay, I'm never doing that again. If you've been in business or multiple businesses, how many times have you said, okay, I'm never doing that again?
Sure.
And if you say that phrase enough times, eventually you'll get really good at what you're doing or what you're going to do in the future. Right. And so that was one of my holy crap. Don't ever bury yourself in debt. You don't need to borrow everything you can borrow in order to live a lifestyle that you can't technically afford. So it was an extremely valuable lesson. And I want to give you a little, a hint of where that came from. Is I had a client back then. He was a professional baseball player. And I didn't know who he was when I met him, started doing landscaping for him. And he was a new first baseman for the Braves back in the early 90s. I remember he told me, he said, Brian, you need to create a McDonald's safety net. And this is in my book, a McDonald's safety net. And I said, what is that? He said, you need to have enough money set aside and enough wherewithal that if you lose your primary income, you could work at McDonald's and still maintain your lifestyle. So whatever lifestyle you've created, you better have enough reserves to continue that lifestyle at a menial task job without losing it. And I had lost mine. Remember that. And I always called that my McDonald's safety net. If I have enough reserves that I could work at McDonald's and keep doing what I'm doing, then I'm doing okay.
Now, Bob's sitting there. I can tell Bob's typing quickly.
I'm like Fred
Bob
McGrath, Dave Justice. Like
I can't say.
The Braves in the 90s were like unbelievable. So
yeah,
you had somebody good there.
Third baseman.
Oh,
there you go. Oh, there you go. You're on the wrong side. His name's probably Chipper, like the lawn, Bob. All right, so
way before Chipper.
They had other third basemen there? Okay, it doesn't matter. All right, so we're learning from this, and you're talking about reserves. Reserves are so important. It's something that Ben has taught all of us many times. My wife is big on reserves. We could go a whole year without any income, and she could live the lifestyle we're at.
Exactly.
Because she's planned that. She's that way. I'm the old Jew. I'm the spender. She's the one who's helped us live by a budget. Do you still today, even with the success you're having, live by a budget, track your numbers, all that stuff? Talk to our audience about how important all those, financial statements that we're all like, this isn't my thing. I'm an entrepreneur. I don't care about the numbers. It'll all work out. Talk to our audience a little bit about that, Brian.
There's two different topics here. The first one is personally, and yes, I run a 3-page Excel spreadsheet budget, which has properties, revenue, income, expenses, debt payoff, schedules, how it's going to happen, monthly goals, yearly goals, 5-year goals. I am fanatical about budgeting and money, right? I don't ever want to be in a position where I lose my lifestyle again. So personally, yes. From a business perspective, and I do a couple of chapters on this in the book, and I will tell you that an entrepreneur...
wait a minute. Before you go on a second, Brian, hold that thought. That book is the Dropout Multi-Millionaire. You can find the link right in our show notes if you haven't already seen it when you were looking before you got here. Brian's going to give you 37 business lessons on how to succeed in business with no money, no education, and more importantly, no clue. So check out the Dropout Multi-Millionaire. Now back to your answer for us, Brian. I just wanted to give the book a plug.
I appreciate that. I will tell you that any entrepreneur that doesn't understand his numbers is headed for failure.
Talk more about that.
Like in every case, right? Like anybody that's an outlier to that, it was a happy accident or
okay. So chapter 1, I make this statement and I say this, listen, every single thing I'm going to tell you is right. However, I'm only right 80% of the time, but the 20% of the time I'm wrong, I already told you I'm wrong. So I'm still right.
Exactly.
Right? There are always going to be outliers. In fact, Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book about it called Outliers. Yep. Every outlier but what about this? Okay, well, what about it? But that's not the way you and I are going to operate. And if you're hoping to succeed in life based on an outlier position, your chances of success are nil.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
So numbers are what it's about. If you don't know them, you better bring somebody into the organization that does. And I'll give you a quick story. I had a guy call me that owns a restaurant up here in Atlanta, and he had been into some of our restaurants, found my name, called me, wanted to talk to me. I said, well, I'll be glad to talk to you, but you got to read my book first because I don't want to have to repeat everything you can just read anyway. I take the meeting. 2 days later, we sit down. I said, how you doing? He goes, honestly, I almost didn't come to the meeting. And I said, why is that? He said, well, because I already know the first question you're going to ask me. I said, yeah, where are your numbers? What's your revenue? What's your expenses? Line item? What's your profit? And he goes, I don't have them. And this is a guy who told me how he was going to expand his restaurants and build a chain. It was going to be the next Moe's. And I'm like, you're telling me that you want to build a business, open a second location and build a chain, and you have no idea if you're even profitable. And he said, honestly, no.
I mean,
and I said, well, I got to stop our conversation right here because there's literally nothing I can tell you, absolutely nothing that will be of any value to you until you can come back and show me what your business is actually doing on paper.
in the restaurant business, that seems like suicide. The restaurant business is rife for just that leakage.
You would be shocked at how many small business owners don't know their numbers. They don't do P&Ls. They don't keep books. I've talked to hundreds of them, and they're like, oh, yeah, you want the books? I have to get my accountant to go see if they can get those pulled together, and maybe I can get them to you. They don't have a clue, you know?
Let me give a tip to everybody out there, because years ago I was speaking with a mentor of mine who teaches a lot of business running classes. And Bob is his name. Bob sat down. He said, look, Chad, you can't come on the teaching tour with me if you don't have all of these things yourself. And he said, do you have all these? I said, you know what? The only thing I don't have on that list, honestly, is I don't have a P&L. At that time, I have a budget. I said, I don't have the P&L. He said, do you use QuickBooks and all that stuff? I said, yes. He said, is your budget in there? I said, yes. He said, great. Just go over to the fifth menu, drop down 4 and click P&L, right? Because if you've got the budget and you're putting all your receipts and it'll print it for you. It's not that difficult. Everybody stresses about creating a P&L. Yet it's one of the most powerful tools that's out there, because it shows you where everything really went, not just where you believed it was going to go. Correct?
Well, I'll give you an example. So I own a chain of restaurants. I don't know how to cook. I don't know how to make drinks. I don't know how to put an order in. And I don't even visit most of the restaurants. I can tell you everything that's going on inside of an organization because I get a weekly P&L, a weekly set of bills that need paid. I get cash balances every single day. I can tell you everything about my company without ever stepping foot in one of those locations. The P&L is the most powerful thing in the world to run a business.
So like numbers or don't like numbers, folks, you better get to like numbers if you're going to succeed in any industry you're in.
Well, and I'll tell you this, Chad, if they don't like numbers, get somebody who does.
There you go. Leverage. We love leverage.
100%.
At what point, so I'm assuming in that first business, you didn't do that. In the second business, did you bring a money person in, or did you kind of train yourself to be that money person?
Again, everything, and I'll say success at any level, or success or progression, success is a progression of learning. It's a progression of ideas, and it's a progression in your personal business life and wherewithal of learning what you need to learn. So the second business I went in, my first thing I knew was I wasn't going to go into debt that I couldn't cover. And then you just learn from there, and you slowly learn over time how things work. So I'm better today than I was last year. I was better then than I was 5 years ago. It's a progression of learning that you really need to get into.
So I'm fascinated. You have this concept of the difference between being self-employed and being a business owner. And we talk about this also, but I'm super curious in your definition. What is the difference between, I think what a lot of people call an entrepreneur, right? I'm self-employed versus owning a business. What is that major difference?
The difference is, if you're a business owner, you're building something of value that you can sell down the road. If you're self-employed, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, when I sell this next company, I'll probably go self-employed because I'm tired of dealing with, employees. But if you're self-employed, it's not something you can sell. If you have a business, you have a business that stands on its own and has its own process, procedures, people, everything's in place. That's something that you can sell. You can build value in a company, and then you can have an exit down the road.
So
Bob, that's why Ben's not here.
Yeah, he's extracting himself.
He's off being an owner.
Yeah. Well, he's extracting himself from the different parts of the business that at one point he ran, right? Brian, it's not like, I would assume it was pretty rare. Maybe later in your career you would have to do this, but you weren't necessarily bringing in people to do things that you had no idea how to do them, right? You probably learned a little bit about how to do your books and eventually got to a place where you're like, I need somebody a little bit smarter than me to do these. Or in marketing, there were things like that where you were doing some of your own marketing, at some point brought somebody in. But was that?
Actually, truthfully, I was never good at doing the actual books. I'm an idiot savant in reading them, but doing them is not what I'm good at. I'm very ADHD.
So right away you started bringing those people in to help.
Right away, it was my wife.
Okay.
Hey, nothing wrong with leverage right in the house. That's a smart place to get it.
She was the bookkeeper. She managed all that stuff early on and let me go do what I was good at. One of the concepts, and we talk about is, and it talks a little bit about what you said here, is I've always built businesses that didn't require me. Now, I started them. I just started doing all the work, but I quickly replaced myself with people who can be strong where I'm weak and even take over the things that I'm doing, because I would rather be able to walk away from that business, much like, who is it? It's not there?
Ben.
Yeah, Ben.
That was always me. And I was honestly, as a business owner, willing to make less money in my business because I was willing to spend that to bring the right people in to do that work so that I could have the lifestyle without having to be at the office.
Okay.
I haven't worked, and I have an office now. I have a whole office building, but I don't have an office. So I go in, I sit at other people's desks if I go in.
Interesting. I like that. All right. So going back to this self-employed versus business owner, for all of our members that are listening that are self-employed, now that they've heard kind of that definite, that's not uncommon to start self-employed and become the business owner by working yourself out of it. Ben, for our example, was self-employed. Just as he's grown, he's stepped back and he's put people in his positions that he's become a business owner. Is that a natural progression, Brian, for a lot of people to go from self-employed to business owners and not just jump in as a business owner step one?
Well, so here's the question. And by the way, success in any business is not knowing everything. It's knowing how to ask the right questions, right? I've heard on one of your podcasts, it's more important to have big ears, right? It's to listen more than you talk. I would further define that as asking the right questions so that you can listen to the answers that you're looking for. To me, that's what's important, right? A good business leader asks questions. Jack Welch, who ran GE, was infamous for walking around and asking questions all day long. That's all he would do because he wanted to get that input and that feedback, right? So asking questions is key. So my first question to you is, if you're in business, what do you want to be? Do you want to be self-employed? I think I'm going to go back to self-employed. Or do you want to build a business? Do you want to have employees? Do you want to have to do all the paperwork and the EEOC stuff and, hanging the labor posters on the wall and, making sure that they're getting their overtime so they don't sue you and making sure your unemployment's, do you want that? Or do you want to be self-employed? If you want to be self-employed, awesome. You can have a good lifestyle. You can make a good living. If you want to build a business, totally different thing. Do you have enough money to start off by hiring a bunch of folks? Or do you need to be the guy that's the solo entrepreneur that's building his company from scratch? Any of those options are good, but you need to decide what you want so that you can go forward building what it is you're trying to do at the end game.
Which is to say, like, these things don't happen by accident, right? I mean, there's some level of planning that goes into actually owning a business that's profitable and that this doesn't happen.
Well, you ask the right questions, put a plan together, and you go forward. And if you don't know what you're doing, to my book's point, having no clue, then you're either going to be in a massive learning curve, or what I like to call the 20-year overnight success, right? Everybody thinks, oh my God, you're so successful. You're like, oh my God, for 20 years, I was eating ramen noodles. Okay. So
hey, don't put down ramen noodles. Hey, hold on. They're delicious.
So you need to figure out what it is you want, and then you start building towards that. That's what you do. And then you're either in the beginning learning stages, or me today, if I start a business, I have lots of resources and money and I can throw people at it, still never show up, and we can build a business together. So depends on where you are in the journey.
Okay. So Bob mentioned at the beginning of this whole episode, Brian, even before we brought you on, Happy New Year, right? He was talking, we're at the top of the year. It's brand new on the year again. We don't know when Dave will drop it yet. We know this is going to get dropped sometime in January. So it's still the new year to people. And I've made my opinion clear. I'm not a big fan of New Year's Eve. I don't think it's a reason to necessarily set goals just because you change a calendar. Yet short-term and long-term goal setting is key, and it's in a lot of people's heads right now. We talk on the podcast very differently, and Ben talks about having long-term dreams with short-term goals. Talk to us about that short-term and long-term goal setting. Help our audience out as they're maybe reevaluating what this year is going to look like.
Goal setting is one of the most important things you can do. And I will tell you, I have an entire spreadsheet built on my goal setting. I've got 22, 23, 24, and 25 goals already laid out. Hence, why are you setting your goals New Year's Eve? Because they should have been laid out 5 years ago. And then I've got January, February, March, April, May, June goals laid out. So I know what I'm going to accomplish each month. And then I have tracking mechanisms to track each one of those because they all feed into the master goal, which feeds into next year, which feeds into the 5-year goal. Now, that's not to say that when you set these goals that they are in concrete. No, sometimes you got to back up and, change things, improvise and adapt. And that's critical to success. So yeah, goal setting is key. I will tell you that 80% of the goals I put on paper, I achieve.
And the other 20%,
I'm just telling you, it's a magical kind of thing.
Wait, and back to your earlier statement. So the other 20%, you were just wrong to have set those, and you would have achieved them had you set the right ones or something like that, right?
No, some of them I set too high.
That's like okay. I'm a believer in you set big goals, because even if you don't reach them, you probably got farther than if you set easy goals just to accomplish.
I'll give you one right now. I set a goal to lose 15 pounds last year. I didn't do it. I like cake too much.
We all like cake. That is for sure. Don't worry. You're on the same boat as Bob over there on that part of the goal. I lost enough for both of you. I'll just throw that out there. All right, Brian. Bob usually comments on something that has nothing to do with anything, and I'm noticing the art behind you. Now, we've talked about this before. We use video just so we can see each other, yet we only record the audio portion of it, so our audience doesn't see it. Do you just like the world, so you have this map behind you, or is that I'm coloring in each country as I go to visit it over my life? Is there a story behind what chose that piece of art?
There is. My daughter actually got that for me several years ago for Christmas, and we started marking where I've been, where she's been, and where we've both been as markers on the board. So the markers aren't up there right now because I just moved it, but yeah, that's kind of she's been to 27 countries, I've been to 25, and we've shared like 15. So it's kind of our lifetime worldwide journey map.
Oh, that's super cool. So do you have goals on your 5-year plan for how many more countries you want to get to in the next 5 years?
I have goals this year and next year and the year after that on where I want to go, if COVID will allow us. I'm going to Antarctica actually in 3 weeks.
Really? Wow.
Yes.
Do you have to
we got to
do the penguins wear masks?
I joke we're going to do penguin tossing. Toss them on the polar bears, No, we can't do that. I'm kidding. We're having a little trouble with Chile getting in and out, but we think we got it resolved. So we're doing an Antarctica trip. And then I'll tell you, I'm going down to Necker Island for a week with a group to visit with Richard Branson in April. That's one of my trips this year.
That's exciting.
And I'm planning a Mediterranean cruise if I can ever get over there as well. So yeah, I've got my travels are mapped out just like everything else.
Is Antarctica your seventh? Does that make like 7 continents? Have you been on all the continents then after
Actually,
that one?
I haven't been to Australia yet because it's closed.
Yeah. It's been closed.
They don't close Australia. Forget it. I'm doing bad vacation lines. They don't close Florida or Chicago. All right. Yes. So Brian, let me ask you, you've got the book, The Dropout Multi-Millionaire, 37 business lessons on how to succeed in business with no money, no education, and no clue. His name's Brian Will. Again, we have the link in the show notes, so you don't have to go looking for it, folks, any farther than that. We didn't talk about all 37 business lessons because we only have a limited time and we want to hit on things we know our audience is going to love. Yet if I had the book in front of me, which I don't at the moment, if I had it in front of me and each chapter was a lesson, what's the one lesson we didn't talk about, didn't touch on that our audience needs to hear about from you? What's one lesson we skipped so far?
I will tell you the premise is intertwined within the entire book.
Okay.
And it's chapter 1. I generally start this off with a question. So, do you know people in your life who seem to win at everything?
Yes.
It's just like, you're like, oh my gosh, that guy did it again.
Yes.
And do you know people who can't seem to win at anything? It's like, oh my God, that guy failed again.
Yes.
Well, do you know why?
No.
I'll tell you why. Here's a question. Do you know the difference between you and Elon Musk, Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos? What's the difference between you and any of these guys? What's the only difference?
They own rocket ships?
Besides the only difference is the way they think and the way you think. That's it. The way they think is what's driven them to the level they're at. The way they think is a product of what I call in the book your personal filter, right? And your personal filter essentially says that every experience you've ever had in life, everything that's ever gone in your head, everything your kindergarten teacher taught you, your parents, the peer pressure from your friends, if you went to college, the people you work with at your job, the podcasts you listen to, the book that's laying on your nightstand, everything that's ever gone into your head creates this subconscious behind your brain filter that accepts or rejects information as it comes at you in real time. So what I'm telling you right now, your brain is either saying, I agree or I disagree. And it's saying that based on the history of everything that's in your brain. And that filter will change in time as you get more information in. But that filter is what you use subconsciously to make decisions. And your decisions are going to lead you to either a success or a failure outcome. Okay? It applies to your personal life. It applies to children if you've got it. It applies to your business. So if you've never succeeded in a business, then you have absolutely no idea what you're doing. Your chances of success are based on luck and randomness. And you really need to understand that you don't know what you're doing, and you need to find a way to solve that. And what I've always said is, listen, you know Apple Computer, right? They just hit $3 trillion in market value yesterday. And do you know who runs Apple Computer? Tim Cook. And do you know Apple Computer has a board of directors? And do you know what the board of directors' job is? Their job is to get together with Tim Cook once a month, once a quarter, and they all sit around a big table and they give him input based on their knowledge, based on their input, based on what they know, based on what their industry is and their experiences. And they say, Tim Cook, this is what we think. All people can give him. And then he takes all that information into his brain and he uses it to go build a $3 trillion company. Now, I ask every business owner, if Tim Cook running a $3 trillion company needs a board of directors, what makes you think you don't need a mentor?
God, I love that. I just love what you just said because we just dropped episodes on that topic over on the 15-point plan. We just talked about having your own personal board of directors and the importance of a mentor in your life because we were talking about the influences that you have around you. I couldn't have asked for you to say something more powerful than what you just shared right there for that one lesson in the book, Brian.
And do you know why people don't do it? Because they have an ego problem. That ego problem will sink them. Your ego is the only thing between you and your future success. And that's intertwined in the entire book.
Wow. There's so much good in that last little soliloquy. Man.
Yeah, folks, if you didn't stay to the end of this one, you're not listening to me right now and you missed the most important part. And if you stayed to the end, go hit that like 30-second back a few times. Go listen to these last 2 or 3 minutes from Brian because while you shared some great stuff in the first half hour, these last 2 minutes, that's a drop the mic conversation, Brian.
I appreciate that. That's a lot of failure in my life, a lot of experience. That's what that is.
Was there
more than most.
Was there a time? Look, I have maybe a similar background in just some of the things, anger issues, some things, I had a chip on my shoulder. That ego, coming up in that vein of a background, that ego is there. I'm assuming when you had that business as a 21-year-old, like you had some ego. Did you have to at some point set your ego aside and go seek mentors? Or talk for just a second about that, because I think that is a real challenge.
This is the quick story, and I have a tattoo that memorializes this story. Weirdly enough. So I had made a friend who had a company. We were going to do business together. Long story. We couldn't do it. A year later, he comes back and I'm running my insurance business at the time. And he says, I want to start a business with you. And he'd already made millions and millions and millions of dollars. And I'm, struggling to pay the bills. And his name was Steve. And he's one of my main mentors in life. And Steve said, I'm going to throw $500,000 into this. We're going to combine our businesses and everybody owes the $500,000 back. And I said, okay, and we're going to start this internet marketing thing. So I'm in the front of the office running my insurance thing. He's in the back running his internet thing. And about 9 months goes by. And my CPA comes into the office one day and he says, Brian, you need to shut the internet thing down. I said, why? He said, because you've already lost $450,000. They're going to bankrupt you. It's not going to work. And now I'm freaking out, right? I've been busting my butt, building my insurance business. I owe $500,000 on Steve's deal. Steve comes in my office the next morning, and I'll never forget. I'm sitting there, and he sits down. He says, listen, we need to invest another $70,000 in servers. And I said, Steve, the CPA was just here. He told me you guys haven't generated a single dollar of revenue. We're going broke. And he said, Brian, trust me. I've done this before. And I said, but Steve, I can't afford to lose any more money. I've already lost everything once. I don't want to lose everything again. I'm terrified of loss at this point. And he said, I'll make you a deal. I'll give you your equity. You give me mine. We'll walk away as friends. You owe me nothing, but I need a decision right now. And I'm looking at him looking at $500,000 of debt. And in my mind, it's that ping pong ball back and forth, right? I went out, I went in, I went out, I went in. And I'm thinking to myself, Steve has already been 10, 20, 100 times more successful than me. Am I going to rely on my personal filter and what I think is going to work? Or am I going to rely on the guy that's already done it? In about 2 minutes of staring at him, I said, you know what? I'm in.
Are you telling me that at that point, like you had the awareness, to recognize, or are you saying that in hindsight, like that's what you were thinking as you sat there?
As I was sitting there thinking about this, and I'd had a conversation with my wife that morning telling her I want out of this deal. And now I'm staring at Steve and he said, you can have it all back. You owe me nothing. We walk away as friends. And I'm literally just like, and I said, all right, I'm in. And he said, all right, good. I don't ever want to hear that conversation again. And he walked out of my office. And a year and a half later, we sold that company for $60 million.
Wait, what's the tattoo?
It says, I'm in.
I'm in. I love it.
I'm in. We'll always remember, sometimes or all the time, maybe, you should listen to somebody who has more experience, more knowledge, has been there and done that, and don't rely on your own filter because maybe it's not right.
We call that around here R&D, right? Rip off and duplicate. Somebody's like the thing you're trying to do in business, somebody's probably already done it. There's probably a map out there for you. R&D.
And so I've carried that lesson with me the rest of my life. If there's somebody that knows, I'll tell you, somebody asked me another podcast, well, how do you fight that ego today? That ego of I'm always right. And I said, when I did my book, honestly, I came up with my own cover and I sent it to the publisher and she said, your cover sucks. And I said, no, I'm very successful. I've built companies. I've made lots of money. This is what we're going to do. And she said, no, it sucks. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, she knows more about book covers than I do. How about I listen to her instead of me? And what we ended up with was an awesome book cover, and I love it, and it's done really well. But I still fight that ego thing every day.
I love the cover. I'm looking at it right now. The Dropout Multi-Millionaire, folks, by Brian Will. Grab it. Get your hands on a book from a guy who's just shared with you a half hour plus of some amazing, amazing information for us. Brian, here in season 2 of Win, Make, Give, we've been living up to the give part of it, and we're making a donation to a charitable organization as a thank you to you for taking your time and talking with our audience today. What charitable organization is it that I can put you on the spot to pick one that we can make a donation to?
That's awesome, guys. I appreciate that. And coincidentally, my daughter is a director of development for the Salvation Army. She raises money for them. So a donation to the Salvation Army would be befitting.
Well, we will absolutely put them on our list and make sure that we spend some of Ben's money and send it over that way to the Salvation Army on behalf of the Win, Make, Give audience. Folks, join us in our Facebook group. That's facebook.com/group/Win, Make, Give, where the conversations continue, where we can talk about the lessons that you learned from today's episode, from the lessons you've learned from your failures, whatever the conversation is you're willing to share and be a part of. Come join us in the Facebook group.
Chad, when we post this one, I feel like we should ask the question, when was the last time you set your ego aside? Like, it's such a powerful, powerful thing to do. I think every time we do it, we become a little bit better human, a little bit better business owner, a little bit better. I love that, Brian.
A little bit better of a husband or a parent even as well while we're on that path, Bob. Because remember, the lessons here at Win, Make, Give are not just for your business. We want to help you with your health, wealth, leadership, and your legacy. That's our focus here as we continue to bring that to you. As we get close to the end of season 2, don't miss any of the last few episodes before our hiatus. Brian, on behalf of Ben, Bob, our whole studio audience, Dave, everybody, we want to thank you for taking the time and joining us today.
Chad and Bob, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it,
and
Brian.
folks, until our next episode, as always, do good.